Hi guys, in this video, I'm going to have an exam review session with a past paper. The paper that I will do today is IB Economics Paper 1 from 23 November exam. Let's give it a go. All right, we all know that one pair of questions shall be chosen to answer. However, for the thorough revision, let me do all of them. Question number 1A. Explain the difference between price elasticity of demand and income elasticity of demand. Pretty simple question. So I'm going to start with briefly defining PD and YD, only focusing on the textbook definitions. In body 1, detailed explanation on PD will be done. First, explain the nature of PD, which is always negative. And then I can explain the types of PD with the different coefficient values, like the features of relatively elastic demand, with the example of switch, cars, things like that, that are having coefficient bigger than 1. And I can further explain the other types of PED, like inelastic ones, with the example of necessity goods that are having coefficient smaller than 1. Additional ones like perfectly inelastic, perfectly elastic, and unit elastic demand shall be briefly analyzed as well. Lastly, I can draw a diagram showing diverse types of PED that are having different stiffness. In body 2, there will be detailed explanation on YD. I'm going to start with explaining the nature of YD according to the different types of goods, such as normal necessity products. Their YD is positive, but coefficient is smaller than 1. But for normal luxury products, YD is positive, and the coefficient is bigger than 1. And for the inferior products, YD is negative, and it is bigger than 0. And for inferior products, its YD is negative. After that, with examples of flights or cars, I can explain the features of normal goods YD. The goods demand goes up when income increases, and vice versa. And for inferior goods YD, the income change is having inverse relationship with demand. Question B. Using real-world examples, evaluate the view that an understanding of price elasticity of demand can be useful for firms trying to increase total revenue. The intro should include the definitions of PD and explanations on its use for firms. First, my evaluation is going to focus on agreement to the view, such as knowing PD helps the firm decide whether to raise or lower price or whether to price discriminate. To be more specific, when a firm's PD is elastic, a firm decreases its revenue through a price increase of the good. So when PD is highly elastic, the firm can use advertising and other promotional techniques to reduce elasticity. On the other hand, when a firm's PD is inelastic, a firm can increase revenue through a price increase of the goods. I can draw both inelastic and elastic demand diagrams showing the different sizes of firms' revenues when there are price changes. And I'm going to further support the agreement by using real-world example, like niche premium fashion brands keep increasing their high-end product prices all the time, since the brand loyalty keep the demand. On the other hand, can fast fashion brand like H&M or Zara, these kind of things, they compete with cheaper prices to keep the demand. Next, I can talk about disagreement to the view. Primarily, there are other factors which can greatly affect the consumption and production other than PD, such as PES-related factors or YD-related factors. Or even government intervention can affect firms' pricing decision. The real-world example I can use would be this. Like, even if PD is elastic for a few agricultural goods like fruits or rice, whatever, due to their inelastic PES, the suppliers cannot either decrease or increase their prices as much as they want to or according to the change in demand. To be more specific, due to climate change or natural disaster, which can greatly disrupt the supply, the firms cannot really determine pricing strategy according to PED. Question number 2A. Explain how an increase in consumer confidence and increase in interest rates might affect macroeconomic equilibrium in the short run in an economy. My intro will define consumer confidence and interest rate change as the factors of affecting AD in an economy. And in body 1, I can explain how increase in consumer confidence affect AD. As the logic is like this, increasing consumer confidence means people find more positive prospect in their consumption and the overall economy. Therefore, they are more likely to purchase cars, real estate, and other consumer goods willingly. And all those would boost more consumer expenditure, leading higher AD. And higher consumption does boost business sector as well, incentivizing business investment, leading higher investment in AD. Both can pull out the equilibrium, making the economy's aggregate demand increases. I can finish with drawing ADA's diagram showing the AD curve shifting to the right. Next, I can explain how an increase in interest rate affects AD. First, increase in interest rate means new money borrowing is getting more expensive. At the same time, existing loans interest payment gets more expensive as well. Such case would lead disposable income to be lowered and new investment reluctant. In other words, consumers decrease their consumption and firms decrease their new investment. Even for government, which has high borrowing, gets more interest payment burden. All can push down current equilibrium, making the economy's aggregate demand decreases. This can be illustrated with an ADAS diagram, AD curve shifting to the left. Question B, using real-world examples, evaluate the view that economic growth always leads to a rise in economic well-being. As you can expect, intro will define economic growth and economic well-being. First, I can evaluate the view from the side of the agreement. It's about how economic growth enables increase the private and public expenditure, such as on education, healthcare, leisure, and public infrastructure like policing system or internet connection. So it is obvious that all those things can result in higher standard of living, more jobs available, higher incomes earned, and less poverty. To be more specific, in quantitative sense like GDP and GNP, economic well-being is achieved. ADAS diagram showing the AD curve shift to the right can support the logic. And I can bring real-world example of countries like Singapore or South Korea that have achieved higher economic growth and how their economic well-being have been improved compared to the past. Next, I can evaluate the view from the perspective of disagreement. First, I can explain how economic growth can cause unintended or neglected negative consequences that can harm qualitative economic well-being, such as higher income inequality or environmental damages such as resource depletion and air pollution can be observed. And to prove that, I can compare the GDP and GDP per capita of the countries, like how the top listed countries are largely different between the two, such as for the GDP ranking, number 1 is the US. On the other hand, for GDP per capita, Luxembourg is the one. With the same logic, GDP versus HDI2, they also present the large difference in their top rankings. This time I can use the real-world example of China, which achieved high economic growth, ranking top 2 in terms of GDP, but having following side effects like air pollution and high income gap, things like that. Question number 3A. Explain how a country might use trade protection to raise government revenue and protect employment in an industry. My intro first defines trade protectionism, their tools and purposes. And in body 1, I can explain how trade protection policies are used to raise government revenues. Specifically, how tariff works, like to consumers, domestic producers, government, and foreign firms. And I can draw a tariff diagram showing the tariff revenues increased or earned to the government. Last, I can analyze how lowered imports allow more domestic firms sales, which can also indirectly raise domestic firms tax revenues. Therefore, in 2 ways, government can collect more tax revenues. Moving on, I can talk about how trade protection policies are used to protect employment in an industry. I can start with explaining how quota and export subsidy work, like to consumers, domestic producers, and foreign firms. Quota and export subsidy diagrams can show the incentivized and increased domestic production. And I can analyze how disincentivizing foreign firms and boosting domestic industries can protect employment in an industry. Question B. Using real-world examples, evaluate a country's decision to impose trade protection on imported goods. I can introduce the types of trade protectionism policies in the introduction. And first, I can talk about positive consequences of trade protection, mainly focusing on its short-term impact. In what ways they are positive to domestic industries, domestic employment, and governmentary revenues. I can analyze all of that. Also, the measures are positive to keep national independence or self-sustainability on certain goods and services, like national defense or for core resources. To support the argument, I can use a real-world example of the US, like how the US has given tax incentives to domestic firms to reshoring, such as to Ford or General Electronics. And the country has imposed tariffs and quotas on competing countries like China on their goods and services. Next, I can analyze how protectionist measures can be negative by mainly focusing on long-run impacts. Obviously, protectionist measures can lead to too much dependence on government protection, and measuring export subsidies effectiveness can be quite uncertain in a way. Also, there can be potential loss on international competitiveness due to high reliance on government protection, and it restrains consumer choices. Obviously, there can be potential retaliation and diplomatic relationship being negatively affected due to the measures. On top of that, resource allocation can be inefficient. Lastly, I can prove that by using real-world example of the very same country above. Due to the trade war between the US and China, import goods prices and availability is largely distorted within the market. That's how I can finish. All right, this is the end of paper 1. Thanks for watching. Bye.